adopted by 33 votes.
The Jewish democratic state begins its new life in the ancient homeland of the Jews.
No one will ever forget how the American Jewish Committee stood in vigilant brotherhood at the cradle of our emergent statehood.
We helped in telling American Jews the importance of Israel and what they are willing to do.
The forces of Israel sweep on in an astonishing triumph of strategy.
When the American Jewish Committee took upon it to intervene or to do something for Israel, we never had to worry about it.
This wicked resolution must sound the alarm for all decent people in the world.
This day is a pivot of history. It heralds a new dawn of peace.
Over 3,500 rockets launched towards Israeli civilian communities, killing 12 and injuring hundreds.
We are here, the entire AJC team, welcoming the new 141 immigrants that came from Ukraine. We are very proud to take part in this amazing humanitarian initiative.
AJC's CEO, Deutch, is a close personal friend and partner. It is a friendship forged around our shared values, ideals, and commitment to Israel and the Jewish people.
Just a few years ago, this gathering would have been impossible.
The AJC has been active in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and at the United Nations. We've also offered delicate assistance to Israel with various Arab and Muslim countries, helping to open doors when others could not.
There are 100 action items that will help keep Jews safe.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting Israel.
AJC, thank you for taking part in our people's story.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Please welcome AJC Jerusalem Chair Ben Plotkin and AJC Jerusalem Director Avital Leibovich.
So excited to be here. Avital, this is great. You did it. We're all here. Give yourself a round of applause from all over the world. Shalom and welcome to AJC Global Forum in Israel.
On behalf of AJC Jerusalem, it is our pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to Israel.
It's wonderful to be here all together, 1,500 strong from over 60 countries, whether representing our 25 regional offices across the United States or from our partner communities across the globe. We have all come to Global Forum because we know that through AJC, we can shape a brighter future for the Jewish people, the State of Israel, and our many friends and allies the world over.
We want to thank you for being here with us to learn, explore, advocate, and most importantly, to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the one and only Jewish state in its first modern city, Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv. Tel translates to a hill or mound created over centuries through the accumulation of layers of civilization built one over the other, pointing to something ancient. Aviv means spring. 113 years ago, this city was built on once bare sand dunes. Tel Aviv reflects the hope of its founders, the rebirth of a modern country in the ancient Jewish homeland.
Thousands of years after King Solomon used the Jaffa port to develop the land of Israel, AJC's Global Forum is taking place on the very same spot. The symbolism is not lost on us. We are here today to remember our history and to shape it for future generations.
On May 14th, 1948, at Independence Hall, which is located on Rothschild, just a 12-minute walk from right here, Israel's Declaration of Independence was signed. I encourage you to take a stroll up to Rothschild and see that small building where it all started. Today, the one-of-a-kind metropolis that is Tel Aviv is known as the Silicon Valley of the Middle East, the economic center of the State of Israel. It is a global hub of innovation, a coveted tourist destination with a world-famous food and cultural scene. 5 years since AJC brought Global Forum to Jerusalem for the very first time, we're here to demonstrate our pride in and commitment to Israel. We've returned in that same spirit to experience the wonder of this beautiful country, to hear from Israeli and world leaders, and to engage in meaningful discussions on the opportunities and challenges facing this country and the Jewish people.
As part of AJC's global advocacy work, we at AJC Jerusalem have been very busy. This year alone, we have had hundreds of diplomatic meetings, briefed dozens of ambassadors, and met with foreign dignitaries visiting Israel. We worked around the clock to keep Israel safe. Despite persistent global challenges and the realities of a complex neighborhood and country, Israel is strong. It has grown closer to its Abrahamic partners, the UAE, Morocco, and Bahrain. New partnerships continue to grow, and we know that the sky is the limit. The first American Jewish organization to open an office in Israel in 1962, AJC, with your vital help, has played a key role in these developments and continues to strengthen Israel's standing on the world stage.
Over the next 4 days, We look forward to celebrating, learning, debating, and experiencing Israel with all of you. I think you know how fortunate we are on behalf of our ancestors to be here celebrating Israel's 75th birthday. We hope you gain great take-home value from this event with new knowledge and new friends. Thank you again for joining us. Toda Rabbah and Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you.
Please welcome AJC Chief Executive Officer Ted Deutch.
Wow. Hello, everyone. Welcome, AJC, to Global Forum Tel Aviv. I don't think I've ever spoken with one of these before. I am so thrilled to welcome all of AJC's delegates here. We are more than 1,500 strong from over 60 countries and over 400 young people from our LIFT program, Campus Global Board, from our Access program, and our summer fellows. I want to also acknowledge my colleagues from our 25 regional offices across the United States and 14 overseas offices as well. So look at where we are today in Israel. Think about Israel at 75 and the success that she has become. We're standing here in Tel Aviv, the center in the world for innovation and technology. The kinds of technology that's literally changing the way the world does business and how we confront the problems that the world faces. Israel is startup nation, and the starts that happen here are changing the world. Israel is now more connected in the region because of the Abraham Accords. Israel's new friends in North Africa and throughout this region make Israel stronger, and Israel's participation in U.S. Central Command and the security arrangements that it has with partners from the region make it stronger in that way as well. Israel is also a progressive country with democracy on full display. This is a country that has full equality for women, an active civil society, advocates for human rights, and perhaps the freest of free presses anywhere in the world. Also, I would note we gather here today just at the conclusion of Tel Aviv Pride, one of the largest LGBTQ gatherings in the world. But we have to acknowledge that there are challenges as well. There's the significant threat of Iran and its nuclear program, its support of terror. There's Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah, rockets from Gaza, rockets in Lebanon, Iran just across the border in Syria. We see widening rifts within Israel that concern us, between the political left and the political right, between religious and secular Jews, and between Israelis and diaspora Jewry. There are concerns about Israel's democracy, and we care deeply at AJC about the future of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. We believe, as we have said repeatedly, in an Israel that protects minority rights and civil liberties, principles rooted in the values of Israel's own Declaration of Independence. And Israel, as Israel is a Jewish and democratic state, it is also the homeland for Jews from everywhere in the world. Men and women from every country, wherever there are Jews, every Jew should continue to feel welcome here in the state of Israel, Orthodox or Reform, conservative or secular, all Jews are welcome here in Israel. So at AJC, we work to enhance the entirety, on behalf of the entirety of the Jewish community all over the world. And we're going to do everything we can to advance Israel's security and well-being, understanding that the bonds between Israel and diaspora Jewry matter to Israel and they matter to the diaspora. And it certainly matters to all of us. We tackle all of these challenges together because we are the global advocacy organization for the Jewish people. And over the next 4 days here in Tel Aviv, we will tackle these challenges head on. And we won't shy away from the tough debates. We'll hear diverse viewpoints. We will reject simplified narratives. We will grapple with the complexities of Israel. And we will do it as AJC always does, recognizing that through thoughtful and principled and nonpartisan advocacy, our voice here and around the world is as important as it has ever been in our history. And so I want to get things going. And as we wind down, I know I speak for all of us when I talk about how proud I am to be in Israel right at this moment. I think about all the times I've been here. This was the first congressional trip I took as a member of Congress. It was the last place I came with a delegation as a member of Congress. I was here when Shimon Peres was laid to rest. I was here when we stood with the victims of terror. I was here leading the first delegation after the dedication of the new U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. And we were always proud to be here. But I also, like so many of you, have a personal story about my own family's trip to Israel. And it was in 2008 that I came to Israel with our whole family for our daughter's Benot Mitzvah. And now, here I stand as the CEO of American Jewish Committee. And I now stand before you with my AJC family as we kick off Global Forum, proudly for the first time for me since 2008, also with my own family, my wife Jill, our daughters Gabby and Serena, our son Cole, Cole's girlfriend Ellie, Serena's fiance Derek, they're here somewhere. It is such an incredible honor for all of us to join with this AJC family at my first Global Forum. There are enormous challenges we will confront together. There are remarkable opportunities we will pursue together. Over the next 4 days, we will come to understand clearly that working together, we can enhance the well-being of the Jewish people and Israel, advance democratic values, and my friends, we can and we will shape the future together. Welcome to Global Forum in Tel Aviv. And now, to get things kicked off, and I apologize in advance, you're going to see a lot of me today. That's just the way this worked out. I would like to invite out on stage a good friend of mine and a good friend of all of ours, U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Tom Nides. Tom, come on out. So, Tom, before I leave the stage, I don't want to miss this opportunity, Ambassador Nides, when you can't say anything. For me, just to offer my appreciation on behalf of all of us, and frankly, on behalf of everyone in America who cares about Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship. As you wind down your time here in Israel, I can tell you that having been to many places around the world, it is it really stands out, having been here both with congressional delegations and with leaders from AJC, that you, Ambassador Nides, are one of the very, very rare types who enjoys the support and respect from across a very diverse political spectrum here, from across a very diverse political spectrum at home, and to know that for these past several years, a Jewish kid from St. Paul has represented all of us who care so deeply about the Jewish state on behalf of the United States is something that all of us are grateful for. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Tom Nides.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Wow, that was nice. Thank you, Ted. It's like Ted's bar mitzvah, isn't it? I mean, seriously. I heard his wife is here, his kids are here, family members are here. So it's like his bar mitzvah event. This is what happens when you only have 40 days left. So I can, well, let me just congratulate all of you for selecting Ted Deutch. Really, whoever came up with the idea, whoever convinced him to do it, whoever decided to get a guy who is a leader in the Congress to give up his seat, to come here, to represent the Jews, to do this, to do it. He's an innovator, he's a leader, and he's actually a very, very good guy. So congratulations to all of you. I will say, though, however, just a moment of honesty, I was trying to get out of this, actually, because I had tickets to the French Open, seriously. For this weekend. I haven't gone anywhere in this job, okay? I've gone here, I went to see my family and back home, and that's one thing I've done. It's like someone called me and said, hey, do you want to go to the French Open? I said, sure. So I'm like, and I look at my schedule, oh my God, I got to do this thing at the AJC. So I said, fine. So I called Ted. I called Ted like 3 weeks ago, hey, Ted, can I get out of this? He goes, no, absolutely not. This is too important. You've got to do it. I go, come on, Ted. He goes, no, you got to go. And I said, okay, fine. So then, about 3 days ago, I looked at my briefing material, and I realized he gave me 4 minutes to speak. So I'm true. I'm not, and I've already just eaten a minute of it. So let me just be very, let me be very quick about what I'm going to say. When I was honored by President Biden to giving me this job, he said to me, "You have only really one goal. We have an unbreakable tie between Israel and the United States, and please do not break it." And since I only have 40 days left, I'll attempt to try to make sure that didn't happen. The remarkable thing about the AJC and what's going on is that it's remarkable the priorities of this administration and the AJC, I think, are linked. It's not perfect because we all have different views. It wouldn't be a group of 1,500 Jews without actually different views. But I think on the principal things, I think we all clearly understand, which has been what my agenda has been here for the 2 years that I've been here. Number one, as Ted mentioned, security. Security is the single most important issue that we all work on collectively. And since I've been here, obviously, the security issue in Iran in particular is certainly the single biggest threat to the security of the state of Israel. And I think this administration and the state of Israel, and I think you'll hear from different leaders, will say that we're working collectively to make sure, as Joe Biden said, to never allow the Iranians to obtain a nuclear weapon. But it's not just, obviously, the Iranian threat. We know what goes on with Hezbollah, what goes on Hamas, which goes on around the region. As many of you know, 4 weeks ago I was here, and Hamas shot, actually the PIJ, which is so bad. PIJ is so bad, even Hamas doesn't want to hang around with them. But they shot 840 rockets in the state of Israel. No country anywhere in the world would tolerate something like that. And we should all understand that the United States supports the view and the importance of Israel not only taking care of themselves, but the security of the state of Israel is utmost in the minds of the United States and the people in this audience. So we have to focus collectively on the security issues that face Israel. Number two, the Abraham Accords. you know, again, the Abraham Accords, as you may have heard, were actually started by a different administration. That's okay. Because the reality is the Trump administration and my predecessor, David Friedman, and Jared Kushner, the people who did the Abraham Accords, was probably one of the most significant foreign policy achievements in the Middle East in a very, very long time. Since I have been here, I've spent an enormous amount of time with the Emiratis, the Bahrainians, the Moroccans, building on the Abraham Accords and making sure that this administration builds upon the successes of the previous administration as the importance of these accords, the security of the State of Israel. And obviously, let us not forget the importance of Egypt and Jordan, because a combination of these 5 countries creates a more secure State of Israel. So that the administration, that the previous administration did a good job of starting it. We are building upon it every day. And wouldn't it be grand? Wouldn't it be grand that we wake up one day and there's a normalization between Saudi Arabia and the State of Israel? And I think, as you've heard from the President and the Secretary of State and many of the government officials, we're going to work towards hopefully getting a goal to achieve that. It's not easy, it's not simple, but I believe it's in the best interest of the United States and the best interest of the State of Israel and the best interest of the Middle East to get that deal done. Number 3, since I've been here, I've spent an enormous amount of time on the Palestinian issue. I am obviously aware that in the next 40 days I probably will not get the Nobel Peace Prize, but in the light of that, we cannot lose the vision of a two-state solution. We cannot lose the sight of a two-state solution. And I know it's become a dream for some and a vision of others, but we have to fundamentally understand the importance of that, the Jews and the Palestinians and the Arabs living side by side, because ultimately that is the only solution for a long-time peace in the region. I have spent a lot of time on the issues beyond just the idea of a two-state solution, is actually helping the Palestinian people. Listen, I'm the American ambassador to Israel, not the American ambassador to the West Bank and Gaza, but I fundamentally believe that most Palestinians living in the West Bank want the same thing as most Jews living in Greenland, Israel. They want security, they want an opportunity, they want health care, they want to have a future. And that is what I've been trying to spend my time on, because again, I think it makes Israel a more secure, democratic Jewish state. Lastly, democracy. I think it's not lost upon anyone that Israel is going through an unusual period of its history. People have called me from all over the world and said, what's going on in Israel? Is democracy ending in Israel? I said, what are you talking about? Listen to what's going on here. For the last 26 weeks, between 150 and 300,000 people, regardless what side of the issue you're on, are showing up every Saturday. That, my friends, would be the equivalent of 6 or 7 million Americans showing up at the mall every Saturday. And guess what? There's been virtually no one arrested. There's been no property damage. The reality of this is democracy is alive and well in Israel, and we should all appreciate that. So on my closing, because I'm now 30 seconds over my allotted time, I want to say, as a little Jewish kid, the youngest of 8 kids, to be able to come here as a liberal, secular Jew, okay, to come here and to be the American ambassador of Israel is the greatest honor of my lifetime. Thank you all very much.
To my friend of many years, Ted Deutch, to AJC President Michael Tickner, to all of you, friends, members, supporters of the American Jewish Committee, welcome to Israel. We have had a long-standing relationship, and you have been active in defending Israel's name and reputation in all continents of the globe. That has been an ongoing task. It still is, but there's been a market change. For years in Project Interchange, you brought to Israel, and you brought Israel to, leaders of many countries with whom we had no relations. But this developed step after step, and you know that Israel has now become a rising power in the world, a rising power in innovation, in technology, in civilian technology, in climate change, in medicine, in agriculture, and in security, fighting terrorism, and so many other things. Israel now is moving to the forefront of artificial intelligence, and you know how that changes the world. I think that in all these efforts and throughout all these changes, you've been a constant source of support and a constant source of encouragement. And I've had the meetings with your leaders over the years, and I've seen not only the relationship of Israel with these countries grow, the relationship with the American Jewish Committee grow. So I want to thank you for your efforts, and this is just the beginning. Much more will follow. And now, a simple word, thanks. Thanks for everything you did. Thanks for everything we will do together. Congratulations, and have a great conference.
Please welcome AJC Honorary President John Shapiro.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here. I did not have to give up tickets to the French Open, but I did receive a text from my family saying, "Don't try to be funny, just be yourself." So, which I thought was myself, but apparently I was misguided. 75 years ago, the State of Israel was born. It was just 3 short years after the Shoah, the worst catastrophic event the Jewish people have faced throughout our history. At the hands of Nazi Germany, 6 million Jews were murdered simply for being Jewish. For the Jewish people, there are few events as miraculous as the rebirth of the State of Israel. And perhaps just as remarkable is the way that much of Europe has evolved in its relationship with the Jewish people and the State of Israel in the years since. Over the past 2 decades, as anti-Semitism resurged in Europe, AJC, through our 8 outposts in Europe and numerous partnerships with European Jewish communities, took the lead in demanding change. In no small part due to the AJC efforts, 12 European governments have created national plans to combat Jewish hatred. More than 20 have appointed special envoys, and the first ever EU plan was adopted to fight an anti-Jewish hate. And though no relationship is perfect, one by one, Israel's engagements with many European countries have blossomed. From expanding trade and signing defense agreements to public commitments to the security of the State of Israel, Europe is, by and large, allied closely with the Jewish state. Today, as we celebrate 75 years since the birth of Israel, rebirth of Israel, we are honored to welcome 3 distinguished European leaders who are committed to fighting anti-Semitism and strengthening ties with Israel. Prime Minister of Lithuania, Ingrida Šimonytė, Vice President of the European Commission, Margaritis Schinas, and Austrian Federal Minister for the EU and Constitution, Karolina Edschnadler. I grew up in Boston, by the way. If some of these are a little bit off, it's that accent. So, and that while there is work still to be done, we know that the future of the European relationship with Israel will be shaped by the shared values they represent. Please join me in welcoming our first esteemed speaker, Prime Minister Šimonytė.
Dear members of AJC community, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to be among friends and address the AJC Global Forum, a platform that brings together leaders and visionaries committed to fostering understanding, tolerance, and cooperation among nations. No one knows better than Jews the tragic price that humanity pays if these values are trampled. If in the hour of need, the ideals of liberty and democracy are not defended. If silence or neutrality prevails in the face of aggression. The most distressing of all is the understanding that humanity has to relearn these lessons again and again. We have witnessed too many times how unaccountable, non-democratic regimes and unchecked human rights abuses inside autocracies will eventually spill over across the borders in the form of aggression. Again, Israel knows it too well. Just some time ago in Europe, we might have dreamt that war of aggression is a tragic relic of the past. Yet, nothing shook the global security and rule-based international order more than ruthless and premeditated war that Russia unleashed against Ukraine. This merciless war is posing the gravest threat to the peace and security in Europe, and I have no doubt to the entire world. It would be no exaggeration to say that Russia's war can be viewed as grave defeat of humanity. Every, I stress every, hope for common sense and human decency was crushed by the cruelty of Russian army. The rape of minors and the elders, tearing children apart from their families and deporting them to Russia, torturing civilians in occupied Ukrainian territory, shelling and occupying the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, threatening the world with nuclear rhetoric, destroying the dam of Nova Kakhovka and turning water into a weapon. These are not scenes from the horror movie. These are the daily realities of Russia's occupation in Ukraine. Russian world, as they call it, Ruski Mir, in action. Indeed, Putin is waging a genocidal war against Ukrainian nation. Putin's regime aims to annihilate the whole nation just because they have a distinct Ukrainian identity and are keen to live in democracy. But Putin's raw hate for democracy, combined with Russia's military cooperation with the regimes in North Korea and Iran, Russia's colonial-like policies in Africa, Russia's weaponization of information, food, energy, water. These are just a few examples how Russia's imperial ambitions pose a danger far beyond Ukrainian borders. On the other hand, this brutal war cemented the unity of like-minded partners across the world. Europe, NATO, the whole democratic world has never been more united, and we must uphold this unity, as this war is an assault against the freedom, democracy, and rule of law. Today, the first line of global defense of liberty and democracy lies in Ukraine. To end this war sooner, we, the community of democratic nations, urgently need to give Ukraine all the weapons it needs. Every delayed day costs human lives, including the lives of innocent civilians. As we work towards establishing the sustainable peace, we need to be very clear that future peace shall be defined by Ukraine, not the aggressor. Indeed, any peace formula must include justice. Only full accountability that reaches even the highest-ranking leaders involved can serve justice to the victims and help to break the horrible cycle of Russia's war in the future. I believe that Israel's experience in seeking justice and historical truth is now of crucial importance to Ukraine, and your advice will certainly be valuable in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, in the past year, during this brutal war, we have witnessed not only unprecedented unity of democracies, but also a growing alliance between Russia and Iran. Both pushed themselves to the status of outcasts and fully share the we against the decadent West worldview. Unfortunately, the status is also mutually beneficial to them. Russia gets access to Iran's weapons supply, and Iran at the same time a cover for advancing its nuclear program and inflaming regional instability. We are witnessing the spread of threats to the security of the democratic world. In this context, my country has done much more than just usual public condemnation. In recent months, at least 5 Iranian drone companies were sanctioned by EU on our initiative. Russia's 10th sanction package widens export ban to Russia of goods used as drone components, includes export ban of dual-use goods to 7 Iranian companies producers of drones, and search for a wider solution to ban export of drone components to Iran. Lithuania spearheaded additional EU sanctions on Iran and will continue to do so in the future. I want to point out that efforts should also continue in exposing Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps for their support to terror groups and expanding the use of all instruments in the EU toolbox to effectively counter such practices. I want to reassure you, we will continue pushing for more sanctions. But at the same time, we all know that Israel's defensive systems remain the best antidote against Iranian weapons. Today, as the democratic world faces the trampling of freedom, it is even more important to maintain an international order that does not tolerate the threats and use of aggression against sovereign states. The Ukrainian struggle also recalls the painful history of our peoples. Lithuania and Israel know the price of independence better than anyone else. Our countries and our people understand that independence is a fragile gift, so we must make every effort to nurture our freedom and independence. This is crucial for the peaceful future of Europe, of the entire democratic world, to stay united and to help Ukraine with all the possible means. The cooperation of our countries is about our shared values. We will always be on the side of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. It is our responsibility as governments and politicians to take necessary decisions to safeguard those values. Defending tolerance and peace requires us to be firm. We have had many opportunities to see that appeasing dictators does not make them better, but only increases their aggression. Golda Meir the famous Israeli politician, said, "We do not thrive on military acts. We do them because we have to. And thank God we are efficient." These words are particularly relevant today. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased that Lithuania and Israel has always been close allies and partners with a very strong historical and cultural bonds between our two nations. Our countries have shared a common struggle for freedom and independence, and we serve as a shining example of resilience in the face of adversity. We understand the importance of remaining vigilant against external threats and safeguarding our hard-fought freedom. We know the significance of unity and solidarity, as well as the power of education and innovation in driving process. Despite our geographic distance, we stand together as nations that have overcome great obstacles to secure our rightful place in the world. Let me use this opportunity once again to express my sincere greetings on the 75th anniversary of the independence of the State of Israel. During these years, Israel has endured countless trials in its question of statehood. Yet, with unwavering determination, the Israeli people have built a thriving nation that serves as a beacon of democracy and progress in the region. Your contribution to science, technology, and culture are remarkable, and they continue to make strides that benefit humanity as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, this year, my hometown, Vilnius, is celebrating 700th birthday. It is about the same number of years It is about the same number of years the history of the Jews is counting in Lithuania. Lithuanian Jews have made a significant contribution to the formation of Lithuanian statehood over time. 700 years of rich history, hundreds, if not thousands, of world-famous personalities, including Nobel Prize winners and internationally acclaimed artists, thinkers, scientists, doctors, and more. Some of the most renowned religious schools still bearing the names of Lithuanian towns and cities, the cities of world-class religious centers that continue their legacy in the United States and Israel. And then the hundreds of theaters, literary artistic groups, schools, and synagogues that have graced our cities and towns, adding to the cultural tapestry of our communities. Lithuania can be rightfully called the untarnished diamond of Europe's Jewish cultural heritage, forged over generation by the Jewish community in Lithuania. Today, our objective as Lithuanians is to uncover, remember, understand, and deeply value both our present cultural treasures and those that have regrettably slipped away. At the same time, we must recognize that without embracing the teachings of history, the prospect of meaningful future remains elusive. The Holocaust inflicted an indescribable trauma upon Lithuania, leaving lasting scars that persist even to this day. The loss we suffered had gone beyond the physical. It has, as a matter of fact, shattered our very sense of identity, our selfhood. The horrific events of the present also bring the tragedies of the past into focus. It is not enough to repeat never again. It is not enough to wait, hoping everything will work itself out. Failure to respond to anti-Semitism, xenophobia, homophobia is not tolerance of dissent, but rather cowardice with destructive consequences. Another important point is that it is not enough to mourn the losses either. It is necessary to nurture, cultivate, and appreciate the seedlings that still remain. Only this way will our words about the painful loss gain weight and wield true power. We aim to perpetuate our history, to restore respect and reverence, whether through the revision of school curriculum, the preservation of Jewish cultural heritage, or the restoration of historical justice. In addition to goodwill compensation law that was enacted in 2011, a decision was made late last year to allocate additional funds as a symbolic monetary compensation for private property, including heirless property of Lithuanian Jews that was nationalized or illegally expropriated by the Nazis and Soviet totalitarian regime. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the AJC for supporting the Lithuanian government in making this important decision for all of us. The law on the prohibition of the promotion of totalitarian and authoritarian regimes and their ideologies was also adopted 6 months ago as a democratic means to defend ourselves against ideologies that aim to destroy democracy, human compassion, and the identities of the states and peoples, as well as against any signs left by these ideologies. It allows for the removal of symbols associated with totalitarianism or authoritarianism from public spaces, including monuments and memorials, as well as renaming of streets, squares, and other public spaces. In conclusion, the bond between Lithuania and Israel is deeply anchored in our shared history, values, and our joint aspiration for a better world. Let us move forward, hand in hand, building bridges, fostering Jewish life, and ensuring that the memory of the past shapes a brighter and more compassionate future for all of us. Let me express the hope that we will all continue to work closely and to provide all possible assistance to Ukraine, that we will make every effort to preserve peace in our regions, and that we will build a community based on commitment to fight against injustice and restrictions on human freedom. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Vice President of the European Commission, Margaritis Schinas.
Your Excellencies, dear friends, I had only been in office for 4 days back in December 2019 when I first met David Harris. I had the honor to just been appointed the Commission Vice President for the first time in charge of a new portfolio of promoting our way of life, bringing together our most anthropocentric policies, including, and this not by accident, not by chance, the fight against anti-Semitism. David was one of my first visitors. He came to my office with a very clear and compelling ask. He told me, look, for our parents and grandparents, Europe was hell. Make Europe again a place where Jews can feel safe and proud to belong. At the time, I could only give David a promise. But 2 years later, when I met your new, dynamic, charismatic CEO, Deutch, I was able to give him more than that. I gave him a strategy. In October 2021, we presented a new comprehensive EU strategy, the first ever, to fight against anti-Semitism and promote Jewish life in Europe. A strategy which was a defining moment for the European Union, a strategy that was welcomed unanimously by our heads of state and government of all our 27 member states. Our commitment and our blueprint was to address some of the most pressing challenges of our time, ensuring the security of Jewish communities in Europe, tackling online anti-Semitism, promoting Holocaust remembrance, and teaching future generations about Jewish life and history. The EU strategy simply aims at bringing an end to anti-Semitism in Europe. But to do that, we must not leave any blind spots. That's why our work is firmly rooted in the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism as a tool to detect the various For us, the definition is a tool to detect the various contemporary forms of anti-Semitic bias, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank wholeheartedly AJC and its Transatlantic Institute in Brussels for being an active and trusted partner from the moment of its inception and now in its implementation. At the heart of our strategy is not only to endorse the IHRA definition, but also to adopt action plans in each member state against anti-Semitism. We already have 14 national governments that have adopted such plans. Austria was the first one, and I'm very happy that my colleague Caroline Edstall is here with us, and she will give us more detail in a moment. But we also called, next to these national plans, to have in all member states, in each member state, a national envoy on anti-Semitism. I'm very happy that these envoys are now operational across the European Union, and I'm particularly happy that the United States have now their own envoy in Ambassador Liebestad. It's a great, great achievement. Dear friends, for us Europeans, standing up against anti-Semitism and ensuring that Jewish life can continue to flourish in Europe is much more than a policy objective. It's a historic duty. Preserving the memory of the Shoah is the cornerstone of the unprecedented peace project that the European Union is all about. This morning, I visited Yad Vashem. I was overwhelmed by the sense of our generation's great responsibility towards the memory of the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust, towards the last survivors, and towards future generations. It's this same feeling that I experienced recently in Brussels, when President Herzog, in a historic address to the plenary of the European Parliament, managed to describe the inconceivable terror of Shoah through the story of one man, a compatriot of mine, a Greek Jew, Daniel Rachmanin. He was, at the time, the only Jew on a remote island, the island of Leros. And yet, the fury and the obsession of the Nazis was such that they sent a ship all the way to Leros to hunt him down and send him to the death camps. Today, also as a native of Thessaloniki, a city universally known as the Madre de Israel, the Jerusalem of the Balkans, as a Greek and as a European, I'm humbled and honored to be your guest here, the State of Israel, to affirm the European Union's steadfast determination to preserve the memory and learn the lessons of the darkest chapter of Europe's history. The European Commission will co-finance the development of the new educational center of the Valley of Communities in Yad Vashem to make sure that the stories of European Jews during the interwar years and their immense contribution in our society and in our civilization are passed to the next generation. And with the adoption of the United States national strategy to combat anti-Semitism, we now have a historic opportunity to step up our trilateral transatlantic cooperation and lead global efforts to fight anti-Semitism. And that this is an opportunity, dear friends, that we cannot afford to waste. Not when we see anti-Semitism and hatred around us take new, vicious forms. Not when we witness Kremlin's desperate attempts to justify war crimes in Ukraine through this false narrative of denazification, distorting the history of the Holocaust and insulting the memory of the victims. And certainly not when some still in this region and beyond deny Israel's very right to exist. Dear friends, Israel celebrates its 75 years. It's a milestone moment. We have seen in the last years that even in the most challenging circumstances, progress is possible in ways one considered almost utopian. The Abrahamic Accords have fostered this unprecedented historic cooperation between Israel and a number of Arab neighbors. The normalization of relations is a fundamental development for regional peace and stability. And we, as European Union, will continue to support and contribute this process. We have scaled up funding to support trilateral projects between the EU, Israel, and Arab partner countries. And we are heavily engaged, for instance, with Israel and Morocco for trilateral projects in the field of water management. Europe and Israel are bound to be not only allies, but also friends. We're bound by history, we're bound by geography and shared interest in the Mediterranean. The world's longest and deepest underwater power cable will soon be connecting Israel with Cyprus and Greece. We're bound by our culture, the values we share, and we will continue to underpin our relations, those of an open, democratic, and rule of law-based society. Just 1 year ago, our president, Ursula von der Leyen, speaking at the Ben Gurion University, spoke of the unprecedented challenges that our democracies face in Europe, in Israel, in the United States, as in every democracy in the world, upholding the rule of law requires constant work. And I believe in the strong foundations of our democracies and their power to overcome these challenges. Renewing democracy, it's not easy, but it's vital. And because democracies offer the environment in which nations prosper, we have a common duty to nourish this vital democratic link between our countries. EU-Israel cooperation on innovation, on research and education is a prime example of that, having grown in strides over the past 20 years. We now have flagship programs. Our Innovation Horizon program and Student Mobility Erasmus programs have supported exchanges, mobility, and groundbreaking research in areas as diverse as health, climate change, and cyber technology. I will be visiting Beersheba tomorrow, on Tuesday, to speak directly with researchers and students that make change happen, one project at a time, and I remain convinced that the best investment we can make is in our people. And with this year being the European Year of Skills, I see an opportunity for the EU and Israel to engage on skills, innovation, training, learning in a more structured way through a regular dialogue based on those priorities and targeting our young citizens. Dear friends, let me leave you by reaffirming that Israel is probably one of the most European-minded countries outside of Europe. A true friend, a real partner, an ally, not only on major issues, but also on the fundamentals that underpin our society, on the model of society we stand for. Our friendship is grounded in our history, but guided by our shared vision of the future. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Austrian Federal Minister for the EU and Constitution, Carolina Edstadler.
Excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, I'm standing here with pleasure and honor today, and I have to say it's my sixth year in politics, and somehow I'm used to giving speeches, but this is really the moment for me, and I will tell you why. Because the ambition to fight every form of anti-Semitism is coming from the bottom of my heart, and coming to Israel always feels like coming home. This year we celebrate the 75th anniversary, a remarkable milestone in the history of Jewish people. As we commemorate this momentous occasion, Austria stands alongside Israel, celebrating its achievements and reaffirming our unwavering support for this sovereign and thriving Jewish nation. From its very inception, Israel has faced countless obstacles, proved to be able to overcome them. Today, it stands as a remarkable testament to the power of human resilience and determination. Since I'm in politics, I've already had the privilege to visiting Israel several times, experiencing its vibrant culture, its rich history, and remarkable achievement firsthand. The warmth and hospitality extended to me left an erasable mark on my heart. The resilience and determination of the Israeli people and the friendship I was able to make touched me, and it reinforced my dedication to strengthen the ties between Austria and Israel, and it deepened my commitment to fostering understanding and cooperation between our nations. Israel is the only democratic country in the region. Israel is committed to our common values, freedom and the rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, Austria has a special historic responsibility, a responsibility that is tied to two issues and essential tasks: safeguarding and protecting Jews in Austrian Europe and beyond, and supporting Israel whenever it is threatened. One thing is clear to me: if Jews are under pressure, our free democracies are under pressure, and we as societies are under pressure. At the AJC Global Forum 5 years ago, our former federal chancellor Sebastian Kurz said, "The fostering of Jewish life and the support of Israel is part of our Staatsräson, of our raison d'etat." And today, I'm here to reaffirm this statement. The security of Israel and of the Jewish people is not negotiable to us. I can proudly say today, 75 years after the State of Israel was founded, Austria and Israel are not only friends but strategic partners, and we are committed to deepen these ties and expanding avenues for cooperation in the years to come. The American Jewish Committee has played an instrumental role in fostering Austria-Israel relations. You have contributed significantly to building bridges, especially among young people. Europe, the United States of America and Israel share a common vision, one that prioritizes individual rights, democratic governance, and the pursuit of peace. Only if we stand together, we will fight back those who seek to undermine our way of life. Ladies and gentlemen, this forum aims at promoting mutual understanding, fostering dialogue, and advancing the rights and well-being of Jewish communities around the world. I do not want to hide the fact that the preconditions for these goals have experienced some downturns in the last few years. During the COVID pandemic, we saw anti-Semitic incidences skyrocketing in Europe and worldwide. We observed rising anti-Semitic incidents when terrorist organizations like the Hamas attacked Israel. The Russian war of aggression against Ukraine has also been causing a dangerous increase in conspiracy theories with links to Judaism and to Jewish individuals. In Austria, we could see a decrease of anti-Semitic incidences in 2022, but to be honest, compared to the peak of 2021. There are certain areas of concern to which we pay special attention. For example, we recognize a rise of violence against Jewish individuals with young people, and that is really alarming. And we observe a surge of Holocaust denial, of trivialization and distortion on social media. Ladies and gentlemen, I know the fight against anti-Semitism is not a sprint, it's a marathon. You cannot just erase prejudices that have been among us thousands of years. It takes all of us to fight the virus of hate. Given Austria's historical burden, we have been strongly committed to taking a decisive stance against anti-Semitism at the international and at the national level. During the Austrian presidency in the Council of the European Union in 2018, the Austrian government drafted and negotiated the first ever declaration against anti-Semitism, which was eventually unanimously adopted. Based on this Council declaration, I presented the first national strategy on against anti-Semitism in January 2021. A core element of the strategy is the Austrian Jewish Cultural Heritage Act, which was passed unanimously by the Austrian Parliament in February 2021. This federal law aims in particular at protecting Jewish institutions, preserving and maintaining the Austrian Jewish cultural heritage, and fostering Jewish communities. On 9th of November 2021, we inaugurated the Shoah Walls of Names in the center of Vienna, a memorial dedicated to all Austrian Jewish children, women, and men murdered in the Shoah. More than 64,440 names that are now carved in stone, inerasable, to give them back their names and at least a part of their dignity, and to give their descendants a place to commemorate. Last year, we initiated the first European Conference on Antisemitism in Vienna, which is an EU member state avant-garde group meeting once a year to promote the implementation of the EU strategy on combating antisemitism. Moreover, we established also a national forum against antisemitism, a civil society platform, bringing together key players to address challenges hand in hand. And finally, I would like to highlight an amendment of the Austrian Citizenship Act, which was approved unanimously by the Austrian Parliament in October 2019. This gives us the legal opportunity to grant the Austrian citizenship, not only to Austrian victims of the Nazi regime, but also to their descendants. So far, more than 31,300 declarations to obtain citizenship have been made, and 16,787 descendants have accepted the Austrian citizenship, more than 10,000 here from Israel. And some of them I had the privilege to hand over personally, here in Israel, in Canada, and in the United States. It has always been very emotional. And I can only say thank you from the bottom of my heart to all who accepted to become Austrians, to give a clear commitment to this new Austria. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm fully aware that no matter what measure we take, be it restitution or granting the Austrian citizenship, we cannot make up for the atrocities committed by Austrians during the Nazi regime. But what I can promise and what I will promise here today is that we will always do everything we can to protect Jews from anti-Semitism. Thank you so much.
Please welcome AJC Executive Council member Melanie Nelkin.
Hello. I am honored to introduce Israeli leader of the opposition, Yair Lapid. Despite starting his political career only a decade ago, Yair Lapid has powerfully made his mark on Israeli history. He helped usher in a new government, a coalition that included an Israeli Arab party for the first time in history. While serving as foreign minister, he led the first ever Israeli government delegation to the United Arab Emirates, an historic milestone that marked a turning point in relations between the two nations. He inaugurated the Israeli diplomatic posts in Abu Dhabi, Manama, and Rabat, and he served as Israel's prime minister. Today, he leads the political opposition. Throughout his career, Yair Lapid has been a steadfast friend to diaspora Jewry and, particularly, to American Jews as a vocal champion of the bipartisan U.S.-Israel relationship. So please join me in welcoming opposition leader Lapid, who will be in conversation with our own AJC CEO Ted Deutch.
Hello. No way I'm going to beat the introduction.
I have high hopes. Welcome, Leader Lapid, my friend. It's really wonderful to have you here. We appreciate your taking time for us. There are some topics that I think everyone wants to hear about. I want to start with a topic I know we need to hear about, and that's in the national security space. You and I have spoken about how powerful it was as the Abraham Accords moved forward for you to visit these countries. Well, one of the topics that always came up was the threat of Iran. And let's start, if I may, with where we are at this moment when so many of us in this room look at the world standing against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and yet the inability to really coalesce around the need for the world to stand up to Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons and its support for terror throughout the world. Your insight here, given your vast experience, I think would be most welcome. And if we could start with that, and again, it's really great to have you on our stage. We really appreciate it.
So this is how we're going to play, directly to Iran? No hi, no how are you, how have you been this month? Thank you, Ted, I'm fine, and how are you, my friend?
This is my first time doing this as AJC CEO. There's a lot they want to hear. I don't want to get in trouble for leaving anything out.
You're right. No, and everybody's so happy with you moving up in the world because you were a politician before. Everywhere you go is moving up in the world. So, okay.
How's your family?
Lee is fine. She says hi. Yeah. Okay. So, well, you have combined actually what was meant to be combined, because you cannot separate the Ukrainian issue from the Iranian issue because Iran was the first and right now far most influential country to move to be on the side of Russia, being the biggest supplier of drones. They're now building a factory together and so on and so forth. I mean, what they're doing is it's like a combination of evilness. And another proof, if anyone needed another proof, to the fact that whatever is wrong in this world, Iran is going to be involved. And part of the problem we have now, this is not in the center of the global attention. You're right, the bigger threat, not only to Israel, but it's existential for us, but it's a huge threat to the entire Middle East and hence, and therefore to the world per se, is a nuclear Iran. But the world in general, and the United States specifically, is preoccupied with the war in Ukraine, with China, or the Pacific in general, with climate change, with other issues. And of course, with domestic issues, like anyone else. I was reading about the Trump indictment and so on and so forth. Yeah, well. So, well, the easiest way of getting the Iranian issue off the table for the current administration is signing a deal that will make it possible for them to say, okay, we dealt with this, and now we can deal with more urgent issues. This will be very wrong. And on this, there is no coalition and opposition in Israel. Everybody's on the same note, telling the American administration, do not sign a bad deal. We saw what happened last time you did it. Right now, Iran, a couple of months ago, has enriched uranium to 84%. When they were asked about it, they say it was by mistake. I think I'm on the details of what it is, and there's no way of enriching 84% by mistake. So they are poking the word on the chest and saying, okay, we're going to try some stuff and make sure and see if you care. And we need to tell them, yes, we do. Israel will do its thing, as we did when I was prime minister, as we're doing now, as we did before I was prime minister, and as we did in the last 20 years. But still, this needs to be part of a global mission. This needs to be orchestrated, and the Americans are the ones who need to orchestrate it. And just signing less for less or some sort of a new version of the JCPOA is not good enough trying to stop Iran from becoming nuclear.
And doesn't...
Thank you.
Don't the members of the IAEA, doesn't the International Atomic Energy Agency have a responsibility to actually take action when Iran continues to flout the rules of the international non-proliferation efforts?
Well, they should, but in order to deal with, as they were saying just a week ago, to deal with what we call the open cases, they need new evidence. And in order to get the evidence, you need to be out there, boots on the ground, which is becoming more and more difficult. So it's right now what they're saying is that unlike what it was published, they didn't close the files. They just said we have no new evidence and therefore we have nowhere to go to. We will deal with it later, or we'll keep it open, but in a frozen kind of way. So it's their responsibility, but I think the more important issue is what is the world doing while Iran is openly or almost openly promoting its nuclear program.
AJC will continue to try to move this issue front and center where it needs to be, particularly in the United States, even as we work through our offices around the world to get the IRGC finally designated as the terrorist organization that it is. Moving away from the regime in Tehran to the shared values that exist between Israel and the United States. Liberal democracy, we talk about the U.S. and Israel, we talk about shared values. Democracy is always right at the top of the list. It's part of what contributes to the special relationship between our two countries. How important has it been to the relationship between the U.S. and Israel over 75 years? And looking out from here into the future, how important is that value for both countries?
Nothing is more important. Nothing is more important for Israel, period. I mean, it has to do with the relationship with the United States. But first and foremost, this is an internal Israeli issue. We need to be a democracy because if we will not be a democracy, this means our economy will go down the drain, our military might is going to be eroding in an unbelievable pace. Our ability to live together as a society is already under terrible attrition. And on the long term, or not even long, if we will not be a democracy, we will not be. It's existential. Israel was founded as a democracy. This is the source of our power. It amazes me that there are so many people who do not understand the fact that there is a reason why is it that the only democracy in the Middle East is also the most successful country in the Middle East. Those issues has to do with each other. We are successful because you need the vibrance and the vitality of a democracy in order to build the startup nation, in order to build the IDF, the army that it is, in order to make this 9 million Jews who are living in the wrong neighborhood such a huge success story. And the problem we have is that democracies on the 21st century are not dying while tanks are surrounding the parliament. It's just a slow motion, attrition towards, and what is happening now, there's too many people who are talking about the possibility of Israel becoming some sort of an illiberal democracy, Hungarian style, forgetting only one thing: there's no such thing as an illiberal democracy. If it's not based on liberal values, women's rights, LGBT rights, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and so on and so forth, then it's not a real democracy, and therefore it's some, yeah. So we need to fight this, and the other reason we need to fight this is, as you said, this is the core of the relations we have with the United States. And the fact that this relationship is bipartisan, it also has to do with it. And we need to make sure we maintain Israel as a democracy for that sake as well.
Beyond those political connections, we're here, 1,500 strong, because we believe in Israel and because we value the importance of Israel-diaspora relations. And we find ourselves here at a moment where within Israel, coming from America, where we see rising polarization, we see greater division, rising challenges for our community, we come to Israel where there seems to be greater division than certainly many of us remember from recent visits. How should we be viewing that? And as Jews who are so committed to our advocacy on behalf of Israel, what should we be doing? What can we do to help address that and to ensure that Israel continues to value diaspora Jewry as much as the diaspora values Israel?
Well, there is no fluent answer for this. But you come here because you love the state of Israel and the people of Israel, not necessarily the government of Israel. I love the state of Israel and the people of Israel, not necessarily the government of Israel. And governments, as long as we are a democracy, governments come and go, the state of Israel stays. This family of ours stays. So, yeah, I'm sometimes unhappy with, I don't know, my kids or my wife, but they're still my family. So this leads me to the second point. The second point, okay, you come here and you see the division and you see the struggle. But don't you find yourself really proud when you see those hundreds and thousands of Israelis who are marching the streets saying, I'm not going to give up on democracy, I'm not going to give up on our values, I'm not going to give up on Israel as a beacon for freedom in this region, because this is why we are out there. And you came for this, at least as you did coming here talking to the government or to government officials.
When we were here about 6 months ago, we met with you and asked the very simple question, what message do you have for diaspora Jews? American Jewish Committee operates all around the world. We advocate on behalf of the entirety of the Jewish people. The message was clear then, and you looked at us and you said, don't give up on us. So we're here 6 months later in dramatic fashion, all of us going back to our communities all across America, all across the world. I ask the same question. What's the message that you would give to us to take away from this visit to Israel?
I will go forward with what I've started 6 months ago. Telling you, I mean, there's so many people who's going to say, well, it's none of your business what we're doing here in our little tense realm. This is not true. You have a voice in this. Israel cannot come to you for decades and telling you we are a family and then tell you, not to speak your mind when something is wrong. Now, we need to hear this voice. We need, if there's criticism, this is what happens within a family. If there are questions, families ask questions. What we need to know is that we have this open dialogue. Sometimes we will say, okay, you know what, I've sent my boy to the army, he might get killed, and on this and that issue, we're saying there's a full stop, and this is an internal issue. But basically, you should have a voice on this. You should tell us what you think. And we want to hear what you have to say. I mean, there are parts of the Israeli society who finds some twisted joy in surrounding themselves with emotional and intellectual walls and not listening to anyone but people who feel the same or think the same. I am not doing this. I want to hear you. The Israelis want to hear you. The vast majority of Israelis who believe in the same values you are want to have an open dialogue, so you have a voice, and this will be my message to you today, 6 months after the first message. Ted, you said you're doing this for the first time, right? Don't you ever interrupt them when they're clapping me.
I'll do better than that. I will do better than that. I will give them the opportunity to give an unlimited amount of applause and to express their deep gratitude, as I will, for your taking time out of your very busy schedule to join with us. Ladies and gentlemen, Yair Lapid.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I think there's an overwhelming feeling where you notice you're in your home and the home of your ancestors. You can go to Jamestown or you can go to DC and feel like this is our country, this is our history. It's still only 200, 300, 400 years old tops, depending on where you are. You know, when you're walking through the old city, it's awe-inspiring and it's just extremely humbling. It makes you feel very small yet very big at the same point in time, because these are your people and this is where you're from and where you're going, and it's all here physically encapsulated in this land. So I got involved in AJC through friends who were involved in the organization. And so my friends were saying, you gotta get involved in AJC, you'll love it. And I kept on saying, nah, that's your organization. I have my own things going on, work, other organizations, maybe one day. And I kept on kicking the can down the road. And then I got an opportunity to be a part of the strategic policy group, which is an unbelievable facet of the AJC. And I got involved, I started to learn more and more, and I went on my first delegation. And I remember sitting in a meeting with the foreign minister of Egypt, and at the end I went over and shook his hand, and the next day my phone started blowing up. And it was because I was on the front page of Egyptian newspapers shaking the hand of the foreign minister, and it had made its way through different channels and social media to the American Jewish community. And I remember just looking at that moment and saying, whoever would have thought that I'd be getting texts in Cairo from friends back home because I'm shaking hands with the foreign minister of Egypt. And from there, it really just took off. So Access is the Young Professionals Division of the American Jewish Committee. It's for young professionals between the ages of 22 to 40, and it serves many, many purposes and priorities. Where I've been extremely fortunate with the AJC and Access is we have really amazing lay leaders for whom we can look up to, who put their money where their mouth is, right? My first Access trips, and candidly they continue to be subsidized by those above us and other generations who see the importance of having youth involvement. I appreciate all that the other generations are financially doing above us, but we need to do our part as well. A goal of Access is to be a strong voice for our demographic range of our 22 to 4-year-olds in the broader organization, to have more representation, to have more understanding, and candidly to also work with campus and high school, so that way we can also serve as the leaders to the younger generations, such as that we have from the older generations. But I can tell you that wherever the forefront is of Jewish engagement, wherever that may be, Access will be there.
The mosaic of our world is beautiful. Our cultures, our histories, our stories. Our differences make us stronger. But hate breaks us apart. And anti-Jewish hate is a growing threat to all of us, endangering Jews and democracy. Wherever anti-Semitism emerges or Israel is attacked, in the United States or around the world, American Jewish Committee is there to respond.
This is a really challenging moment for the Jewish community.
We confront anti-Semitism from all sources, mobilize our leaders to combat bigotry, empower young Jews to be strong, resilient, and proud, and rally the public to join in the fight. We open doors to and for Israel across the globe. We forge new friendships for the Jewish state and advance peace in the Middle East and beyond. We create coalitions to uphold the principles of democracy and take on extremist forces that endanger us all. From Brooklyn to Berlin, from Athens to Abu Dhabi, we take bold action to build a brighter Jewish future. To get there, we must remain united, because we're all pieces of the bigger picture. If we stand together, we can shape the future.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand by for a few moments as we await the President of Israel, His Excellency Isaac Herzog. Please welcome AJC President Michael Tickner.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is truly a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. In just a few moments, we will be joined by His Excellency, the President of the State of Israel, Isaac Herzog, and the First Lady, Michal Herzog. President Herzog will be in conversation with AJC CEO Ted Deutch. In advance of the arrival of the President and First Lady, please be sure that your mobile phones are silent, and when they arrive, please stand in their honor. Now, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce President Isaac Herzog, Israel's 11th president. President Herzog's story is, in so many ways, the story of modern Israel. Born to a European father and an Egyptian mother, he is first-generation Israeli. He bravely served his country in the IDF, and like so many Israelis, he spent quite a bit of time in New York. After serving in the Knesset, including as opposition leader, he was elected chairman of the Jewish Agency, where he sought to bridge the divide between the diaspora and Israel. And in 2021, he was elected president of Israel, winning more Knesset votes than any other Israeli president in its history. Although the Israeli presidency has traditionally been a largely ceremonial role, President Herzog has used his unique credibility to reach out to all sectors of Israeli society to repair the social fabric of the Jewish state. At this time of deep division, his voice and his leadership are essential, and we at AJC are deeply grateful for his efforts. He also routinely represents Israel on the world stage, making historic visits to the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and Turkey. It is now my honor to announce the arrival of the President of the State of Israel, His Excellency President Isaac Herzog, and the First Lady of Israel, Michal Herzog.
President, we could not be more honored or excited to bring to a close our first plenary session at AJC's Global Forum in Israel, celebrating Israel's 75th, than to be graced by your presence and have the opportunity to hear you on our stage. Thank you again for being with us.
Thank you very much. First of all, it's a great honor to be here with you this evening with my wife, the First Lady, Michal. We're very honored to be here. We're happy, Ted. We are very proud of you, Ted, that you took over the helm. Last time we met when you came with Speaker Nancy Pelosi to the President's home on an official visit, and you're doing a terrific job. I have huge respect for the American Jewish Committee, for its historic role, for what it does, for its impact on the Jewish world, Israel, and the entire universe. And we're also, Michal and I are very proud that our niece, Alexandra, is a big shot in this organization.
We are as well. As an organization that is committed to advocating for the Jewish people in its entirety all around the world, your advocacy, your commitment to diaspora Jewry, to recognizing the importance of every Jew around the world, is an inspiration to us. And for us to have this opportunity, I'd like to start by asking the question, all of your efforts to engage the broadest cross-section of the Jewish world, from left to right, from secular to Orthodox, you've gone out of your way to be the President of Israel, who is really representing the people of Israel. Where does that come from? Is it just part of the role you see yourself playing? It's personal to you, clearly. If you could just share with us.
It is a passion, and I think it's also part and parcel of the role of the president, meaning the president is the head of state of the only Jewish nation, the nation state of the Jewish people in the world. And as such, it's only natural that he will have such a role. But it also comes out of a deep passion of mine. As you know, my late father, Chaim Herzog, was also Israel's president, was the 6th president. And I come from a family that serves the Jewish people for generations. Some of you have known my uncle, Abba Iban, who was Israel's legendary foreign minister. Some of you have known my other uncle, Jacob Herzog, who was a huge diplomat. Some of you have known my grandfather, Rabbi Isaac Herzog, who was Israel's chief rabbi and a huge Jewish leader. You know my brother Mike, who's the ambassador in Washington. I can go on if you want to. But truly, we believe in the Jewish people. We believe that the story of the Jewish people, I believe in the story of the Jewish people. My previous role was chairman of the world's biggest Jewish organization, the Jewish Agency. And I'm adamantly passionate, me and my family, about the story of the Jewish people. And we are a small nation of about 15 million plus Jews around the globe in a sea of 8 billion human beings. We have a role to play. We have a role, we have a story, we have a role, and therefore we should protect and preserve the unity of our people amidst all of its differences. And that's why I've launched my initiative of Voice of the People, Kol Ha'am, where right now, as of this week, we're holding labs all over the Jewish world to have discussions about how do we move on, how do we care for each other, and how do we identify the future leadership of the Jewish people?
Thank you. Thank you for launching that effort. I just want to pause to marvel at the way that your family's history is just inextricably linked with the history
I haven't even told you half of it, but doesn't matter. I had one of my father's uncles was the head of the AFL-CIO. He was Sidney Hillman.
Really?
And FDR would say, clear it with Sid. So now you have to understand what Shabbos dinners means in our family. There's no way you can escape this stuff. Ask Michal.
You're sitting here in a room full of people whose Shabbos dinners, while we don't have the same personal connections throughout the history of Israel that you have, our Shabbos dinners, I'm comfortable saying all of us, are full of conversations about Israel, about the importance of Israel, about the role that diaspora Jewry can play, how we can ensure strengthened ties between the Jewish people in America and around the world and Israel. And I know that you're just launching this really important effort, and I'm not asking you to guess what the outcome will be, but I will ask, right now, even as you're starting this process, as we go back, when we go back to America, when we go back to our 25 regional offices and our offices around the world, what can we be doing to help strengthen the relationship between diaspora Jewry and the State of Israel?
So you have a huge role to play. And I would say first that I believe that part of the problem is the lack of understanding of what Israel is all about. There's a judgmental attitude in certain spheres of American public life, in certain quarters, that judges us according to a certain scale, that is not always realistic in terms of where we live and what we do. We are a small nation which is truly challenged by a huge enemy which works day in, day out to undermine us, to kill our citizens, employ terror against us, surround us from all sides, and rush to the bomb, and spread anti-Semitism and hatred. And on the other hand, we are a nation that is extremely zestful, successful, reaching incredible heights in so many incredible fields that you know. We will discuss the internal issue and the judicial reform in a minute, I'm sure. But all I'm saying is that in some places, you know, we are judged wrongly by what we do and how strategic we are. And I think you have an immense role to play in telling the story of Israeli democracy, diversity, achievements. We can, of course, deal with the faults and mistakes like any nation. I've got news for you. All nations are challenged and simmering and debating, especially in the modern era. And of course, the need to protect and preserve our only Jewish state in the world.
So we're here on a we're here on a Sunday afternoon. Last night, again, there were massive protests around the country. Democracy, Israeli democracy, in action. How should we be thinking about all of that?
First of all, let's understand where we're at, because the talks are under my auspices, and I give huge attention to this process, and I find it serious and important. And I also tell the leaders that they bear huge responsibility as to the fate and outcome of these talks, and especially as to the effort that is needed in order to reach a wide agreement on the core issues which are so important. These are critical days, and I sincerely hope that the leaders and the elected officials will take the right decisions, because not only the people of Israel want a wide agreement, consensus on the core issues without, of course, hurting the basic rules of democracy and the independence of the judiciary. But more importantly, I also feel that in this room, the Jewish world demands us not to be torn apart and want us to move forward with a dialogue.
AJC, from the moment you launched your effort to bring the parties together, has been as supportive as we possibly can be. We agree that this is a moment that the diaspora as a whole has to recognize why we cannot afford to let it tear us apart.
Absolutely. Look, the debate itself on the core issue of the boundaries between the three arms of government is a legitimate debate that stems from a process of debating that has ensued 30 years ago. These are critical questions that have come out when you don't have a constitution. How far can one arm of government supersede the other? That's all a very legitimate debate. The way it's done, what is it unleashed, actually, perhaps it's good that it has come up now as a public issue, as a real in-depth discussion of where we are and where we are going to as a nation. I find it actually a potentially healthy process where we air out our difference and talk to each other. And by the way, our home, the President's residence, both Michal and me and the entire team, we are hosting thousands of Israelis every month who are discussing these issues from all sides of Israeli multicultural society. And we have to face that reality and try our best to come to amicable solutions which preserve our democracy, which protect our democracy, which preserve and protect the independence of our judiciary, which is a very noble arm of government, and nonetheless find the right answers as to the boundaries between these arms of government.
And we wish you nothing but success in reaching that compromise. Finally, Mr. President, there are over 400 young participants here, high school students, college students, young adults. As you prepare to exit our stage, do you have a message?
I also want to say a word about the Abraham Accords before you ask me about that.
Oh, I would. Let's shift gears. I'm trying to be respectful of time.
Well, no, don't worry. We'll take another few minutes.
Great.
So I just want.
I'm going to put that down. Let me.
No, it's okay. We'll at the end.
Well, then I've got a lot to ask.
No, not a lot, but.
Let me just ask this instead. We just came from the UAE, and we heard over and over the story of your visit to the United Arab Emirates to advance Israel's place in the world, and the attacks that were launched against the UAE, and the expectation as a visiting as a visiting president, that those attacks would prompt you to leave the UAE. Instead, you had nothing. You said no to that. You extended your stay. Talk to us about how you view your role in advancing Israel's place.
I believe that the Abraham Accords, which have followed the trailblazing peace agreements with Jordan and Egypt, are a sea change in history, sea change in world affairs in the region, because there is an opening of a real dialogue between Jew and Muslim in the region. We see it all over. The interactions are huge, and I find the role of the United Arab Emirates and the Kingdom of Bahrain, which we visited as well, immensely important. And I truly believe that we should make an effort that the next chapter will be with Saudi Arabia. I also want to commend the Kingdom of Morocco, which has gone as a leap ahead dramatically in our relations, and I believe in that relations tremendously. I also want to commend the Sudan, and I hope that they will settle their affairs. But I want to say something about the UAE, because the UAE is moving forward continuously in the relationship, and that is extremely important. I want to congratulate my good friend Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, the President of the United Arab Emirates, for assuming the leadership of the International Climate Conference known as COP28, which will take place a few months down the road. I was extremely honored to receive a personal invitation by Sheikh Mohammed and his government, and I will attend that conference together with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I also want to add that most importantly is that this conference is steered and headed by Sheikh Sultan al-Jaber, by Dr. Sultan al-Jaber, who is the representative of the UAE in dealing with climate issues, because I believe that the cooperation between Israel and the Arab nations, Israel and the United Arab Emirates and its neighbors, as to the issue of climate and its impact in the world, has a huge potential, and it sends a spirit of inclusiveness, of friendship, of future, of hope to our peoples. And I welcome this wholeheartedly, and I believe it will make a huge change in the future.
Thank you. And AJC, as you know, Mr. President, through our offices in Jerusalem and in Abu Dhabi, remains committed to advancing this vision that you describe, as well as the opportunities to build closer relations between Jews and Muslims. And I am being told to wrap it up, but if you would like to stay.
No. So let's take your final question now. You can do.
So I'm.
The 400 youngsters here.
Yes. How did you know that was my next question? Yes.
Because that's what you said.
It's not often that they get to hear from the President of the State of Israel. What would you like them to hear before you leave our stage?
So guys, you have, your generation will face many challenges. Our parents' generation faced, our generation faced, and your generation will face. You will have to take a lead role and add another chapter in the history of the Jewish people. And I would say that one is the challenge of unity, meaning not uniformity, but unity, meaning the respect, deep love and affection between the nation state of the Jewish people, the state of Israel and its people, and the Jewish diaspora, wherever it may be. All Jews must be able to practice their beliefs with no fears and with no harassment, and be connected in their hearts to the state of Israel. And we should be able to have the impact, the influence of the Jewish world within our society, within our democracy, understanding that Israel is a developing society, evolving society into a more multicultural, more diversified, fascinating, interesting, and promising country. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency, the President of the State of Israel, Isaac Herzog. Thank you, President Herzog. Thank you, First Lady.
please welcome AJC Honorary President Harriet Schleifer.
Erev Tov, Havarim Li. Israel is one of the most dynamic countries on earth. Whether you're interested in its booming tech scene, its ever-changing political landscape, or its food and culture, or you worry about its security challenges, the division between secular and religious Jews in Israel, or challenges to coexistence, following events out of Israel can feel like a full-time job. And when you're a diaspora Jew, sometimes thousands of miles away, you come to rely on the many talented journalists who live here to explain, analyze, and synthesize current events. This is a particularly critical moment for Israel. The prospect of judicial reform, which has brought hundreds of thousands of Israelis into the streets, still looms large. Israel's place in the region continues to grow and shift. And all the while, security challenges persist from groups like Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and from Iran and its terror proxy, Hezbollah. With us this evening to tackle these topics and so much more is a diverse group of Israeli journalists from across the political and ideological spectrum. Please join me in welcoming to the Global Forum stage Gideon Levy, columnist and member of the editorial board of Haaretz, Lahav Harkov, senior contributing editor and diplomatic correspondent for the Jerusalem Post, Amit Segal, chief political correspondent and commentator of Channel 12 News, and Gili Cohen, diplomatic correspondent for Kan, Israeli Public Broadcasting Corporation, and our moderator, Yoav Limor, morning show host for Channel 12 News and commentator for Israel Hayom. Enjoy.
Wow, so many friends. Last time we were in Washington, D.C., this time in Tel Aviv, which is much better. Israel is the best. So we have 4 friends and lots of topics to cover. You know, it's Israel and news happen by the hour. And I want to try and touch them all, so we'll try to be as short as possible. I refer to you, Amit. No, just kidding. There is a nice story about a young gentleman like you entering a stage to give a speech, and he starts by apologizing for having an ugly cut on his face, saying that the same morning, while he was shaving, he was thinking of his speech, so he cut his face. An elder gentleman stands up from the crowd and says to him, "Young gentleman, instead of thinking of your speech and cutting your face, you should have thought of your face and cut your speech." So bear it in mind while you speak. Okay, let's start with the most, burning issue in Israel, the judicial reform. Gili, you cover it from the diplomatic angle. Amit, you cover it from the political angle. Lav, of course, you do the same. And Gideon, your penny, your cent on that, where we stand, where we're heading, because that tears the Israeli society for the past few months. Gili.
I'll be the young and the one who starts. First of all, I will say thank you, and I'm glad to be here, and welcome all of you to Tel Aviv. I think that Israel usually said that this is the only democratic state in this villa in the jungle, in this very tough neighborhood that we live in. And I think that the past 23 weeks demonstrated the most. The fact that each and every week there is more than 100,000 of Israelis going to the streets, not the usually common protesters in Israel, although they are a bit losing momentum last weekends. I think that this really demonstrates the fact that Israel really proud of, the democracy values of Israel. Saying that, and from my perspective as a diplomatic correspondent, this is a topic that raises up in each and every conversation that I have, and for for Israeli diplomats, of course. If it was talking usually about two-state solution or the Palestinian issue and any other major talking points, they are not on the list anymore, or they are, fifth or sixth. And the foremost and foremost is the judicial overhaul, which means a lot, which means this is the reality.
Amit, where are we heading?
Well, there is an old Chinese proverb, which I've just made up, saying that two things are hardest to translate, poetry and politics. So I'll try to translate it to a non-Israeli audience, and I know some of it will be lost on translation. Americans usually speak about 5 political systems. First, there was the independence, then the watershed line was the slavery, etc., etc. In Israel, we started with economy. The first political system was ruled by the question of money. Socialism versus capitalism, and socialism ruled. 25% of the Knesset members used to be kibbutz members, whereas only 3% of the Israeli population back then in the 50s belonged to kibbutz, because Israelis admired the idea of kibbutz, of socialism towards also almost communism. Then came the Yom Kippur War, and it turned to be a security question, and that was the second political system. I guess, I'm not guessing, I know that 6 years ago when we spoke at the AJC conference in Washington, 80% of the questions from the audience were about the Palestinian question. This is no longer the case, as Gili mentioned. No questions about the Palestinians, no references from foreign leaders. It's only about the judicial reform. And I claim that we've just started our third political system. And it's not about the judicial reform. The judicial reform is a way to interpret the real question in Israel. Nations around their 8th or 9th decade to their existence, not nations, states, stop asking the how questions and start asking the why questions. The how questions were, how will we shape our economic system? Socialism versus capitalism. How large Israel will be in terms of the borders? But now we came to the why questions. Who we are. Are we Jewish and democratic? 51% Jewish and 49% democratic? Or the other way around? And maybe I'll expand about it later, but it's not that the anti-reform protesters are for the Supreme Court. They are for the Supreme Court because it represents the liberal values in their opinion. So they want to preserve the power of the Supreme Court, and it goes the other way around. The pro-reform protesters are not against the idea of judicial activism. They don't want this specific activism when the Supreme Court consists of a liberal majority. So it's about the values rather than the judiciary.
Lab.
So what I think this judicial reform debate has really brought out into the open for anyone who was not paying attention before this is deep flaws in Israel's system of government. Because how do you have a system where both sides of the debate feel like they're disenfranchised? I mean, the right has been winning elections for the past 14 years, and the right feels like they're disenfranchised because they feel that the institutions, whether it's the government bureaucracy or the Supreme Court, are against them. And the left feels disenfranchised because they basically can't win an election anymore. But both sides, in a way, are right, because we have a really flawed government system here. First of all, with the the main problem really, and the core of a lot of these things when we're talking about the way the system works in Israel, is that we don't have a real separation of powers. The executive's power fully comes from the legislature, except that it's sort of turned on its head. The executive tells the legislature what to do because we don't have a system where most of the parties have primaries, and even the parties that do have primaries, Likud has a sort of very vibrant culture within the Likud, but there's hero worship of Netanyahu, so even the primary system doesn't prevent it from being sort of a party of one man, even though he was elected by a majority of the members of Likud. When you don't have this separation of powers, when the executive always tells the legislature what to do, so first of all, yes, the only sort of bulwark against the tyranny of the majority is the Supreme Court, even though the Supreme Court has sort of taken on all sorts of authorities that it didn't necessarily, or wasn't necessarily intended to have when the structure was put together. And on the other hand, you have a situation where the opposition is, doesn't really do that. They give a lot of speeches, but they don't really have a chance of ever getting anything done. And so both sides right now are very upset because each side feels like they can't win. And who knows what will happen with these negotiations that are happening in Bet HaNassi right now. But a good outcome, I think, would be a real deep change in the system that would address the flaws that make everybody unhappy.
Gideon?
First of all, let me thank the organizers and all of you for inviting me. I cannot take it for granted. I have a reputation of someone who spoils any Zionistic party. I try not to do it tonight, but I highly appreciate the opportunity to express some different voices. When it comes to the protest movement, I must tell you I'm quite torn. On one hand, nobody can be indifferent to this phenomena of hundreds of thousands of Israelis going week after week to protest, to fight over democracy, to fight over human rights, to fight over the legislations which they perceive as very, very dangerous. But in the same time, there are two big elephants in the room, and one is half hidden and the other one is totally hidden. The one big elephant in the room is obviously Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the most beloved and the most hated Prime Minister Israel had ever had. And Netanyahu is present in this protest as an elephant in the room that we don't look at it because I believe that most of the motivation of the protesters are to get rid of Benjamin Netanyahu. They don't say it, but that's the main motivation. And they cover it up with all kinds of other important issues. But by the end of the day, this protest will not be over until Netanyahu will step down. You can support it, you can be against it, but that's the truth. The bigger elephant, obviously, in the room is obviously the Israeli occupation, which is not an occupation anymore because occupation, by definition, is a temporary phenomena. We are speaking about a phenomena of 57 years now. This is not temporary. There is no end by the horizon even to this occupation, and it does define Israel. The occupation defines Israel. The occupation defines the regime of Israel. We think that we will ignore it, we will fight over democracy for the Jews, and ignore the fact that in Israel, 5.5 million Palestinians are living under our control and are not part of the game. More than this, part of them are the only people in the world without citizenship. Can you ignore this when you fight over democracy? Can you close one eye and say, okay, we are fighting here about reform, about Supreme Court, and totally hide the fact that there are millions of people who are not part of this game, who have no rights whatsoever? And because I think that the occupation defines the regime of Israel, and because I think that you cannot be half a democracy, like you can't be half pregnant. Many times we would like maybe to be half pregnant, it doesn't work. You can't be half a democracy. And you can't possess a tyranny in your backyard and claim that you are a democracy. And as long as this, thank you. And as long as this brutal tyranny is in our backyard, all the talkings about democracy and all the protests to improve the democracy are hollow. And last sentence, there was also a democracy in South Africa. There were elections, there was free press. The only problem is that not everyone participated.
South Africa. I have family from South Africa.
Okay, let me finish.
That's not true. It's just false.
There were elections in South Africa. Did anyone in the world perceive South Africa as a democracy because there were elections in South Africa? Did anyone perceive South Africa as a democratic state and the Supreme Court?
We said short.
Finished. I raised my case.
I could have opened it now to a debate vis-à-vis the Palestinian issue, but we have very limited time and many topics. I want to, Amit, really short, still the judicial reform, how is it going to end? Because, you know, we have so many people coming from outside of Israel looking at that, very much concerned of what's going on in here, asking themselves questions, even regarding the US-Israeli relationship, which, you know, we're seeing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not receiving an invitation to the White House. So very shortly, because I want to touch other topics as well, how is it going to end?
The judicial reform is dead, but no one has informed the family yet. Now, what is the judicial reform? The very idea, the speech that the Justice Minister has given 5 months ago included 150% of the reform he had wanted to pass in the first place. He thought it would be like a, what you call a pork barrel policy, that he'll give and take, that he'll compromise on 50% and get whatever he wanted. But he didn't understand that you cannot take this method, these tactics of passing bills, you know, to introduce something very severe and then to compromise when it gets to the very gist of the soul of a country or the soul of a political camp. So I think it's dead, and I think that there is an option. I mean, Netanyahu will try to have the negotiations in the president's residence like he held the negotiations with the Palestinians.
Forever.
Exactly. But there is no John Kerry to travel from Washington to Jerusalem 14 times.
Perhaps it's Herzog.
Exactly. But problem is that when it comes to economy and high-tech industry, this policy or this tactics is very bad because meanwhile, the high-tech industry is suffering heavy losses. So my gamble is that somewhere between days and months, Netanyahu will take 5% of the judicial reform, declare a victory, and retreat, like in Vietnam.
And just one thing, looking from the outside, Netanyahu and his people speak differently in English in the US or in Europe, and in Hebrew to us, Israelis, totally different phrases and words that we're hearing. Gili, I've mentioned the Israeli-American relationship. From the diplomatic angle, I want to touch the diaspora angle afterwards. The diplomatic angle, is it going to improve between Biden and Netanyahu?
Let's all cross our fingers and hope for. I think that Israel and the US relations shapes basically Israel's approach towards the area. I mean, we cannot talk Iran, we cannot talk about normalization with the Saudis, we cannot talk on basically on each and every subject without the Americans in the room. But Netanyahu used to, or tend to lean on some left politician in his government in order to have some of excuse why his ideology is not getting into reality. And now his left politician that he leans on is basically Biden. So I think that while Netanyahu is still waiting for the invitation which is not coming or which is not arriving, this is shaping or influence the way he treats to any major subject. I mentioned Iran. I think that the fact that we are not hearing Netanyahu as vocal as we used to hear him regarding Iran is basically because he's not invited, and basically because he's still in a wait-and-see mode. So this is truly in the room while Netanyahu is still in such an uncertain position.
Love looking at the diaspora angle of that, and furthermore, you know, many of our friends here are non-Orthodox. They are Reformed, they are conservative. Most of the U.S. Jewish people are non-Orthodox, but this is a very Orthodox government who's going for many pro-Orthodox reforms. It's an interesting way to use it.
The only reform thing in the government is the judicial reform.
Exactly.
So this is the closest.
I remember that. So how is it going to look? Because from our friends here point of view.
Well, I don't think I have to tell the people in the audience what their own point of view is, but I do think that to speak very broadly, when I speak to groups from abroad coming to Israel, or when I go to them on my tours, they tend to be somewhat confused, like what is happening in Israel? Everything just seems to be blowing up. It seems to be like a total disaster. And I try to explain that on the one hand, everyday life really is continuing as usual. Like we're not, you know, there were a few days here and there where things were really disrupted, but overall, like we're living our lives. But at the same time, it's a real reckoning with problems that have been bubbling under the surface for a long time. In terms of the religion and state issues, the thing is that there's just no constituency in Israel for the sort of non-Orthodox institutions that American Jews are used to. So when Israelis talk about being secular, they mean that they almost never go to synagogue. They might like fast in Yom Kippur and they'll have a Seder, you know, the vast majority of Israelis have a Seder on Pesach, but they're not going to, they're not interested in a reform or conservative synagogue.
David Ben-Gurion used to say that he's not going to a synagogue, but the synagogue he's not going to is Orthodox.
Right.
So this is what being secular in Israel means.
Right. It's exactly. It's that very famous statement. When Israelis say secular, they mean secular. They don't mean reform. And I think that sometimes U.S. Jews have trouble understanding that. On the other hand, liberal Israelis believe that everyone should sort of have the right to worship the way they want to worship. The problem is that, as I had said before, the left can't really win an election in Israel, and the far right, you know, in theory, Likud is the liberal right-wing party, right? That, you know, is for individual rights. The thing is that, first of all, they've been, to some extent, there's a rising populist right in Likud, which is similar to things you see all over the world, including the US. And in addition, you have the far right and the Orthodox parties, which in a coalition system just really hold a lot of leverage. And so even if, you know, if you were to ask Netanyahu in secret what he thinks, he would probably be fine with women reading the Torah at the Kotel. He can't say it and he can't do it because his political future is on the line.
But I want to be tough on that, and you can, Gideon, we can start with you, but any of you can add to that. You all should know, or know very well, and Netanyahu better than any of us, that our friends here are an essential part of Israel's existence, strength, defense, international ties, etc., etc. When I give lectures to the Israeli army and to the high-rank officers, and I say the two legs that prevent 250 million Arabs in the Middle East or 2 million Muslims from marching over and taking us over, one is Dimona, and the other thing is the US, 300 million Americans standing behind Israel, which you represent, most of the people here. And the current government, in a way, deters them. When we see ministers this week in Los Angeles not gaining meetings with Jewish leaders, in Washington, in Pennsylvania, etc., that resembles to the world that Israel and the Jewish people from within are third, and Israel is less secure, less stronger. We saw in last Passover, Israel is being attacked from all fronts, North Gaza, West Bank, at the same time, because the Arab world feels that Israel is weaker.
Israel is, first of all, extremely strong military, and this you know better than I. It's a regional superpower, and I wouldn't get to all kind of pessimistic appreciation about this.
But don't be so disappointed about it. I mean,
I
it's
am.
strong, but it's
I
okay.
am.
It's
I
okay.
am. I am.
Okay.
The problem is, and we will repeat it again and again, that Israel is living on its sword. And you can't live on your sword forever. And if we think that the solution will always be building new walls and tunnels and getting the best weapons in the world, you really think that this will guarantee us forever? Or in other words, we have to ask ourselves, with the United States or without them, where are we heading? Where are we going to? What will be here? We are now between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, half and half, Palestinians and Jews. That's a matter of fact. What will be here in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time, in 50 years' time? Are we really trusting only the weapons that we'll get? We tried all the military options in the last 75 years. We were very powerful, and look where we got. Is the time to restart the whole project, to rethink what is the solution finally? Where are we going to? I leave it open as it is.
One thing for sure, in 50 years, Netanyahu will be prime minister.
Yeah, that's
I don't know
no
anything
doubt.
else. Amit?
Not sure which Netanyahu.
And by the way, Amit Segal will be in Channel 12.
Yes, exactly.
And he will still be 30.
And you'll write about the occupation.
Absolutely.
Because
from the grave, from my grave.
Everybody has to earn something for living. Anyway, Yossi Beilin once wrote, the former Justice Minister, he wrote a book named The Death of the American Uncle. It was 25 years ago, and he claimed, not the uncle died, I think he meant that the relationship that Israelis had with the American Jewry was dead in the sense that we are no longer the young sibling or the young nephew needs help. And his solution was to establish Taglit, okay, in order to foster the connections between the young generation and Israel, the young generation. So it's not the uncle, it's the cousins. And I think what we see now is that we are second cousins once removed. Now, the first generation, brothers usually call each other, visit each other, right? The cousins call each other on Passover, Rosh Hashanah, to say hi. The second cousins, once removed, have to go to MyHeritage in order to find the names and to see, wow, we are relatives. I really don't think we should be at that stage. And this is the real problem, that we have to go back to basics, as basketball commentators usually say, to abandon the idea that we should hug the Christian community in the States as a way to substitute the relationship with the American Jewry. So maybe we should go to MyHeritage and find that we are relatives.
Gili? Love?
I will say, just to conclude the Amit's idea, that we need also to acknowledge the fact that we need to hear those voices. They are well-spoken, and we need to hear them, although it might be harsh sometimes, but this is what family do. They fight, and it's okay.
When they stop fighting, it begins to be a problem.
Exactly.
Love?
I agree with all the sentiments. I'm just not very optimistic that it's going to change because I have heard people say these things since I've been doing this since 2011. So I've been hearing these things. the whole time, and seeing, that ultimately in politics win. And, to add to Amit, sort of like many, many quotes, Henry Kissinger once said that Israel has no foreign policy, it only has domestic policy. So I am become very cynical about the fact that Israel doesn't have that much of a diaspora policy, it just has domestic politics.
I think with policy and without policy, one of, at least my biggest hopes is the young generation of the Jewish American community. You see more and more, maybe not all of you will agree that it's a hope. For people like me, it's a great hope, maybe the greatest hope today. What is happening in campuses, what is happening in Jewish community centers. There's a new generation who wants to redefine the term friendship, because friendship does not necessarily mean always blind support, unconditioned support. Friendship means also being critical. Friendship means also saying tough things if needed. When you have a relative or a friend who is addicted to drugs, who is a drug addict, you have two ways to deal with him. One is to supply him with money. He will be very grateful, but is it friendship? Is it care? The other way is to force him to go for rehabilitation. That's, in my view, real friendship or real care. And Israel needs rehabilitation because Israel is addicted to the occupation.
Gideon, thank you very much on that. Since I believe we should end up with a smile, but with something to think.
I'm smiling.
Listen, I know. You're the only one from the Palestinian side who smiles, I remind you.
I'm not in the Palestinian side, no, I'm in
I'll
the
tell you a
Jewish Israeli
story,
side.
I'll tell you a story which I've heard in the US quite a few years ago, which is still relevant today. It says of a bank in Fifth Avenue, one of the biggest banks, let's say Chase Manhattan Bank, who has a huge building in Fifth Avenue, and on the top, on the roof, they have a huge neon sign, says, "You have got a friend in Chase Manhattan Bank." Came over one of the big Israeli banks, which one? Bank Leumi, opened their branch opposite in Chase Manhattan's, and they said, "We approached the Jewish community of New York," so they put a huge neon red sign on the top of their building writing, "You have got a mishpuche in Bank Leumi." The people of Chase Manhattan Bank saw it. Took them a week. And they've changed their sign and wrote, "If you have got a mishpucha in Bank Leumi, you really need a friend in Chase Manhattan Bank." Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an honor. Have a nice time in Israel. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This concludes this evening's program.